Welcome back to the Losing Panel E3 Sport Integrity Week, powered by MasterCard. That hashtag again is SIW. Please do use it, and then we get an opportunity to interact with you on social media. Meanwhile, via the app, you can engage and ask questions as well. Our moderators will be putting your questions to the panel throughout. We've got one more to go today on our day 3 theme, which is focused around both esports and sports betting. But just before I hand over to the moderator, I want to remind you about tomorrow as well. We get underway at 8 GMT, 9 CET, or I guess if you're on Eastern time, 3 in the morning. I would expect some loyal US followers to be dialing in then, but don't worry if you do want to sleep in. We'll get all these panels put up on YouTube as well. But we start in called India Stage with a panel on integrity and the emerging sports market, and that's powered by India on Track. And then continuing in that theme, we move on to maintaining integrity through sports technology. That's at 9 GMT, 10 CET. The full program, incidentally, is on our website and via social media as well. But we wrap up here with a panel called Betting and Sport, I guess in some senses following on from the last panel that I moderated. And the subtitle here is A Match Made in Heaven. And the context is going to focus around sports betting being such a lucrative global industry. It's worth about $5 trillion. And with a fast-paced global growth, it of course faces complex challenges and divides opinion. The rapid evolution is particularly evident in the United States. Federal state sports betting operators who can benefit from these new laws, state-by-state legalization, like we discussed only half an hour ago. And that presents a number of different opportunities, but also challenges as well around integrity. So to delve into this and topics that spurn from it, we've again got a really impressive panel, and it will be led by our moderator, Dustin Gauka, who is head of content in the US at Catena Media. Dustin, a very good afternoon to you, and it's over to you to introduce your panel for our final session of the day.
Cheers. Thanks, Ben. And yeah, I run a number of gambling websites, news websites here in the United States, including Legal Sports Reports. If you're aware of that, we cover granularly the regulation and often integrity and data deals that go on here in the United States. So happy to welcome in a number of panelists who know a lot about the subject we're going to talk about here. We have Oliver Lamb, he's the head sportsbook controller at Canby. We have Joe Bertoloni, executive director for the International Center for Gaming Regulation, and Ludovico Calvi, president of the Global Lottery Monitoring System. I'll have each of them introduce themselves a little more than I did just there and talk a little bit about the topic. Start with Oliver.
Yeah, sure. Thanks for the intro there, Dustin. Just said, Oliver Lamb, head sportsbook controller at Canby, based in our London office. I've got 18 years experience working in sports betting across the UK, mainland Europe, and now with Canby stretching out into the Americas as well. I've always worked in trading operations, compliance and integrity roles throughout my career. For those who aren't aware, Canby, we're a business-to-business supplier of odds and risk management services. We formed in 2010, so a decade in the business. We started off operating in Europe with some brands focusing on markets over there, which regulated, of course, before the US. And since 2018, we've been focusing a lot on the US market. We struck the first wager in the post-PASPA online New Jersey market with our partners DraftKings. And we're currently up and running in 12 regulated states in the US, powering partners apart from DraftKings such as Penn National and Rush Street. And my role within Canby encompasses a lot of our trading operations, but one particular area is our integrity responses. So we have a 24/7 team focused just on sports integrity, based globally, including in our Philadelphia office, who are monitoring all of our wagers and events we offer from an integrity perspective and escalating any cases we see out to our operators and integrity partners.
Great. And as Oliver said, can be a pretty major part of the ecosystem here in the U.S. and abroad. So great to have him here. Joe, tell us a little bit more about what you do at the ICGR and how you intersect with all of this.
Sure, great. And welcome, everybody. And thanks to SIGA for sponsoring and hosting this panel. So I'm the executive director of UNLV's, University of Nevada, Las Vegas's International Center for Gaming Regulation. And we're the only academic institution in the world that specializes in the study of gaming regulation. And we primarily do that through education, research, and convening stakeholders in certain matters. And we happen to specialize in tribal gaming in the U.S. and then obviously sports betting as well. And that's my tie into this is essentially goes back to about 2008 when I was a founding member of one of the companies that eventually became William Hill US. And I was the director of operations there running the Nevada operations and Delaware. And so we were one of the first companies to go outside of Nevada to actually operate sports betting. And then the other intersection with regulation was that I was the former chief of the Gaming Control Board's technology division. And so we actually regulated all the sports betting systems that are out there. And so having that cross section makes sports betting fun for me and very interesting to what we do at the center.
Great. Thanks, Joe. Definitely excited to talk to you again. And Ludovico, tell us a little bit about that. What you do, obviously, lottery has been, for those who don't know, has been a fairly major part of how sports betting has rolled out here in the United States, as lotteries are actually in charge of it in several states here in the U.S. and abroad.
Well, first of all, thank you to SIGA for hosting this great conference in the weeks and all the, so important and definitely very, very well focused sessions. It's a pleasure to be here. I've been in the sports betting industry for the last 28 years. I started with a company called William Hill as Joe, but that was 1992. I launched the international department, and we were targeting for the first time jurisdiction outside of the UK. That was Europe and the Far East. Then the legalization process in Europe actually took place, and I went back to my country, Italy, where betting was legalized, and I was working with the regulator to create a sustainable regulatory framework. I worked for a lottery called SIGA, set up the betting division, launched the operations. I went on to work for another lottery called Lottomatica, again, launching the betting division, creating the brand, retail and digital. Lottomatica acquired a company called GTech. I became SVP for GTech, trying to provide sports betting software solutions to lotteries. And in turn, in 2015, GTech acquired IGT. So I became a senior vice president for global marketing for IGT, selling sports betting solutions to casinos as well as lotteries. And in the meantime, I've been keeping my role as CEO of Lottomatica Betting Limited, which is a business turning over $1 billion US of annual and 55 million EBITDA. So I've been really, most of my life in the sports betting industry. Since 2017, I've been elected president of the Global Lottery Monitoring System, which is a non-for-profit sports integrity association. It's a global state lotteries mutualized monitoring system. What we do is not only preventing and detecting irregular and suspicious betting patterns globally. We have 3 integrity apps, one in the Far East in Hong Kong, the other one in Europe, in Denmark, and for the North American market in Canada, in Montreal. So we cover basically Asian, Europe, and North, and in some ways South American sports betting markets. We also provide services to sports federation, regulators, public institutions, and we develop educational programs because there is a lot in terms of preventions to be done. I'm also a member of the American Gaming Association. In 2015, I joined the Sports Betting Task Force, and we had as an aim the objective to repeal PASPA, which we managed in May 2018. I also launched the sports betting operations in Oregon with the Oregon State Lottery last year when we went live in October with Scoreboard. So that's me, really, as fast as I could.
And a personal connection, I am here in Oregon and use the Scoreboard app, so happy to hear that. I'll jump right in. I'll make sure we say that we do have questions. We are taking questions on the app as well. If you have any, happy to take those. But first off, start off high level. Where do we think we stand in terms of integrity of sport as it relates to betting right now? Are we in firm ground? Is there still work to be done? I know this is probably a bit of a shifting sands question, but where are we right now, Oliver?
Yeah, cheers. Also, one thing, just to join in the William Hill party, I also started my career there, so hat trick right there. But no, actually, going back to the early days of my career, I know that, we have definitely made big advances. I mean, when I started off, even though everybody, I would say, who worked on the trading floor was just as interested in maintaining sports integrity as they are nowadays, there was just no real framework for them to operate within. I mean, if you saw a suspicious event back then, you just didn't know what to do with it. You could tell your line manager, but you wouldn't know where it would go after that. You would no lines of communication. So I think where we are now, is vastly different. Of course, before the US, the rest of the world, Europe in particular, has been making some advances in this area and setting up organizations such as GLMS who can kind of really take a central role in these kind of things. And it's been great to see in the US that, from day one, it was kind of baked into the regulation in pretty much every state that, operators need to have internal controls, strong ones as well around sports integrity monitoring. Of course, there needs to be integrity monitoring providers that you could escalate out to. So it's been good to see it's been front and center. I know that's played a part in what's been so far a very pleasantly clean market. Obviously, work to do, things to advance. Obviously, as things move forward, it'd be great to see more cooperation, I think, between the states. Even I'm sure there is, and there would be naturally, organically, lines of communication between regulators. It'd be great to see a formal framework around that, I think, just to really solidify things. But considering it's early days, I think it's in a good place to start off with, definitely.
And Ludovico, obviously, when we talk about this question, the U.S. in its launch of sports betting in the last, outside of Nevada in the last 2 years, has really benefited from the ecosystem that's already kind of been created in Europe and rest of the world. You kind of get to just piggyback on what's already existed. You're not reinventing the wheel, no?
No, absolutely. I agree with Oliver. We have seen really a kind of evolution, a positive evolution. If I think of when I started in the early 90s in the sports betting industry, I've seen cases of people being, put behind bars, athletes, sports organization in trouble. So there is a much wider cooperations, but there is still a greater need for global collective responsibility and collective actions by all stakeholders. As Oliver said, regulators, sports betting operators, governors, sports federations, leagues. So all stakeholders need to take this seriously. And the phenomena of manipulation of sports competition or ghost matches is global. It's global. You cannot have a US-wide phenomenon in a world where you can fix a game which can take place in a continent and be financed in the continent, and the game is held in another one. Well, the only way you can tackle it is by working collectively. So this is even more important with the outbreak of the pandemic, where the degree of vulnerability by athletes, sports organizations has increased because of the financial burden. While criminal organizations have seen a tremendous window of opportunities with COVID-19 to further legitimize not only their presence on the territory, but also to announce their illicit activities. So we need some work to do, especially in the new normal. And again, there are organizations out there. We just need to share information more effectively to work by being at the same side of the table.
And Joe, wrap up this question with you. It's, in Nevada, obviously, you've dealt with the growing pains. You've had sports betting for decades, and you guys were the sports books there, and the regulators there were good at rooting out. There are examples of this in college where there's fixing going on, and it was actually rooted out by the books themselves alongside regulators. But we really have come a long way, even in Nevada.
Yeah, it's interesting. Certainly, as the market matures in the U.S., the notion of integrity becomes so much more important because we are getting influences from the global partners that are coming in, and I think it's a bit of a mixed bag. Back in the day, the markets were very efficient because sports betting was localized to some extent. Obviously, there was the illegal market that took place that everyone knows about, but it was very localized, and simply put, people just wouldn't bet on games where they thought there were any integrity issues. But that's such an immature approach compared to what's gone on in Europe and what's gone on globally. And to everyone's point, the ensuring that there's communication between all the stakeholders to make sure that these things are coordinated. I used to tell a story in Nevada, but it relates to what everyone's saying, which is, there were 7 jobs, 7 bookmakers that really made the market in Nevada, and you could generally find those guys at a local restaurant every morning talking about things and exchanging information, and that was the informal network that took place that did a great job. But that's Nevada, and it's a very tiny market compared to what we're dealing with now. So I think the notion of sports integrity is certainly something that's not new, but as we roll out new regulations in each state, it's getting addressed in a little bit of different. In every state we go into, everyone kind of takes a little bit of a different approach, but we all need to learn from the past experiences that where guys have been doing this for many, many years.
And to catch up our audience, and this is not a gaming conference per se, so we kind of maybe skip over some of the details. Just as a matter of backstory for what's going on in the United States, it gets rolled out here very piecemeal. It's not legal everywhere. Different states have legalized it, have taken different approaches to legalizing it, down to whether it's run by as a monopoly or has an open market. So we have a variety of states, and there's a variety of approaches to this, to just sports betting in general. So I guess that leads into what are we getting right here in the U.S. on integrity matters, or are there lessons or best practices that have been employed here in the U.S. or that have been missed as we roll it out by state? And is there something being done in Europe? Again, I think Oliver, you talked a little bit about having more communication between the stakeholders. That seems like kind of the central thing as we try to have sports betting at different levels in different states and trying to everyone get on the same page.
Yeah, no, definitely. I'd emphasise that point again. I think obviously if there is an integrity case that takes place or is spotted within the US, I mean it's key that information, if it takes place in, say, New Jersey around the integrity of an event, that needs to travel very quickly across to Oregon. So everybody needs to be able to leverage that information in the regulated market as quickly as possible. So. Like you said, in Europe, one thing they have in place is obviously their individual countries here, so there's no specific way of them communicating before they form this thing called the Group of Copenhagen, where the various countries with their national platforms could actually collaborate and share this information. I mean, obviously, you need some kind of formal framework here because you're dealing with very sensitive information, and it's not just around a potentially fixed match. You'll be looking at transactional details, details about individuals, which if it gets into even the wrong hands in terms of, being posted by someone in a public forum, this is very damaging, libelous information if it's not completely accurate. So there needs to be very quick, but also formal, structured channels to communicate in. And that's probably, like I said, what's maybe lacking at the moment. I would not be surprised at all if the regulators are talking informally. I'm sure they are. But obviously, it needs probably more than that. It needs some kind of formal channels to be in place.
I guess does anybody have, Ludovico? How do we get to that if that's the necessity?
Well, Dustin, the issue with the US was that the US market has been paying a huge price. PASPA was a disaster because, with the excuse of, with all due respect, safeguarding sports integrity, it was a massive market was created. A massive market where nobody could control anything. A lot of things were happening underwater, and you cannot see. So now more and more regulators and governors are realizing that there is a need. The public enemy is not the lottery against the casino, against the DFS guys. It's the black market, and we need to actually sponsor sustainable sports betting bills where the fiscal, commercial, and operational regulatory frameworks are sustainable and they can pay the overall value chain, because this is the only way you can actually not only beat the black market, but make also monitor all the processes and the transactions at federal level, at local level. There are some jurisdictions which have inserted in their sports betting bill the obligation to be part of a sports integrity association or a group. or having sports integrity services as a must. Otherwise, you don't get the license, okay? So there are practices and best practices which, again, without reinventing the wheel, could be easily inserted in a sports betting bill. But I agree with Oliver, this is a global phenomenon. So in as much as European countries are working with each other within the framework of the Convention of the Council of Europe, which is the only legal instrument, legal instrument we have, just trying to address all measures related to the manipulation of sports competitions. What has happened is that 7 countries have ratified. In these 7 countries, you have the national platforms. So you have the police, you have the regulators, you have the sports leagues, they're all working together. And if you replicate this model state by state, then you will have a global platform where all the information are converging. The law enforcement agent and sports league will detect real time what's going on. I mean, it's there. The information is there. We just need to have a political will and really from a healthy market perspective, the willingness to go ahead and do it.
I don't think you'll get any argument from this panel that the federal ban on betting here in the United States pre-2018 was a quote-unquote disaster. That's a word I would use as well. But Joe, same question. What are we getting right? What can we do better? I mean, we know that things have developed differently here in the United States, and it is almost like Europe, where it's a country by country approach, but on a state by state basis. What could we be doing better here? And if it's the same answer, communication. Like a lot of that may be happening informally, but do we need to codify it?
Yeah, look, picking up on both Ludwig's and Ludvico and Oliver's point. Look, I can tell you that what we're doing at UNLV is we host what we call regulator councils and roundtables, and I can tell you, as of the last one that we had 25 plus regulators, all talking amongst themselves, and that's part of what we do. And this disparity between one state versus the other is a topic of discussion, and how do we deal with it, and how do we deal with the differences of both suppliers and operators in those regards. So I think what I'd say is there's a recognition that we need to somehow coordinate that. Yet two other things that always weigh in the U.S. is it's states' rights versus federalism, and that's unique with the states. Wanting to control their own destinies and staving off any type of federal legislation that would govern. Everyone's got an opinion, and there are 2 different camps on that. And then the issue that you always get into is how do we protect the interest of the very reasons that we have passed sports betting. So the pandemic has brought on something very interesting, right? It's accelerated everything. Everyone sees tax revenues associated with it. So each state is going to approach it a little differently. So it'll be interesting to see how this all rolls out. What I can tell you, and what we all know, is that it is an emerging market in every sense of the word, right? Simply because the regulatory frameworks that are in place, one of the things that it takes time to happen is change. But I think that the people that I'm talking to and interacting with recognize that it's not perfect. It's a dynamic situation, and for everyone observing, one of the things that's interesting is everyone is watching what everyone else does, and they're recognizing that there are some good things and some bad things, and certainly looking towards the UK and Europe and the people that have a great deal of experience in very mature markets for better ways to do things.
All right. I don't think you can do one of these panels without mentioning the pandemic, as it obviously changes everything we've done in our lives. But it's definitely changed sports and betting, and in particular, I think we're wondering what new concerns for integrity have there been as a result of this. We, here in the U.S. and abroad, we've seen more money wagered on sports that have been on the fringes, but were kind of brought to the fore as other sports and major sports were shuttered. Table tennis in particular, that we know that there was a ton of money bet on that here in the US and elsewhere, because you could live stream matches. They were going on all times of the day. We even had some betting shut down on Ukrainian table tennis at one point in time. So what beyond, you can talk a little bit more about that, or what else you see. But Ludovico, what have we seen in terms of these fringe sports and the concerns that it brings us for integrity?
We have seen ghost matches in the past, Dustin. We have never, at GLMS, in the 3 apps, we've never been so busy as in the last 7 months. It's been incredible. Not only because, again, in the absence of sports, a lot of our members, our licensed sports betting operators, they wanted to ask GLMS what type of integrity rating we would give to sports such as table tennis or even minor soccer leagues, tennis or esports tournaments. We had several cases of esports tournaments on internet, very, very minor. And of course, we worked very closely with law enforcement agencies. We had to act quickly. We provided integrity ratings. We also provided recommendations as to what level of liability and stake they would be in a position to go ahead and accept bets. And this is not only to protect, of course, the consumers and as a whole, the credibility of the sports and the athletes, but also to make sure that we are in control. And whenever there is a need, to bet, you can televise or stream anything. Even what happened in South America with ghost matches being organized a week before, Dustin, with faked scores going on during the 90 minutes while the games never took place, just deceiving punters, so bettors, and deceiving sports betting operators, creating huge issues. So we have been very busy. The world of sport is more vulnerable, especially I would say college sports, lower leagues. If you think that the cost of the salary in the balance sheet of a fixed cost in the P&L, I would say, of a sports organization is 67-70% as fixed cost. And, you still need to actually have that cost. Plus the lack of sales tickets, because the stadium were closed. If they are, they are playing, they won't get any money from that. Without sports, there were no money coming from the TV rights. So the minor leagues have been real troubles. And at the same time, criminal organizations have been there, in the search of opportunities to jump in and exploit the situation. So this is what is going to happen in the future. So we had to actually increase the level of vigilance. And that's what we are doing with the 3 apps. We have, of course, a 24/7 service. We are constantly monitoring the events worldwide. We have also messaging services among operators. So the trading floors of 33 sports books are talking to each other and obviously signaling anything happening. What is happening in Hong Kong, the bet is struck in Hong Kong, but the gaming somewhere in South America or in North America, we can find out. So we had to actually raise up the standards.
And Oliver, as a part of the B2B provider here, you have a unique position here. Obviously, we don't have this problem anymore in the United States because we have, as of tomorrow, we have all 4 major sports going on here at the same time. So this pressure on fringe sports will be less. But in the past months, there must have been pressure from clients to say, "Hey, we don't have anything for people to bet on. What can we give them to bet on that maybe we weren't before? What pressure does that put on you and other operators to validate the integrity of matches that maybe were getting very little handle or wagers earlier before the pandemic?"
No, yeah, definitely, Dustin. I mean, it's been a unique challenge, and to say, I mean, from early February when things started getting more serious, it was the domino effect of losing more and more leagues and sports until, like I said, eventually we're left with just table tennis, darts, and esports, really, pretty much. And obviously, I mean, these are operator partners, like any organizations, just trying to keep revenue streams coming in, and the temptation can be there definitely to just offer whatever you can, whatever's out there. I mean, start betting on the weather if you can, whatever it may be. But you had to obviously strike a very fine balance and make sure that you're doing the right thing. So, I mean, straight away, once we realized what was going on, I know we definitely changed the way we were working with this kind of stuff. Even though we'd always offered for 10 years. You offer table tennis betting, but it's never been the central pillar of our product. We've never seen this kind of handle going through the sport, that's for sure. So I had to approach it from a different angle, definitely. And early on, every tournament we offered, we were taking meetings with senior stakeholders internally, looking at it from the risk management perspective. What kind of limits should we set from a trading perspective of what kind of markets are reasonable to offer here within each event. From a participant perspective, are there any kind of individuals involved in these games we'd rather not offer? And going through a very kind of slow validation process, slow but methodical, before we actually offered anything at all, kind of was definitely the cornerstone of our approach here. And I'd say definitely served us well. I mean, as Ludo says, there were alerts over the period, and I'd say the fact that Ludovico was exceptionally busy over this period is not surprising, but I would say at least it does show a healthy focus within these organizations, these betting companies, that they are detecting this kind of activity. So they're not just sitting on it, they're seeing it, they're escalating it. I would have been surprised if there were no alerts at all over this period, that's for sure. But no, it's been a kind of ongoing process as well. I know, say with the table tennis, for example, we started seeing on some of these, like you said, some of these Ukrainian tournaments early on, some kind of irregular betting, shall we say. And even before we got kind of any mandates from regulators, we were taking down events. We took down whole tournaments without any kind of external pressure. You had to take these kind of decisions early on as an organisation to not just protect revenues, but to protect your own business, your operators. Nobody wants to be associated with match fixing, so you've got to be proactive, definitely. And it's been an interesting period, but we've learned a lot. And one thing I would definitely say to finish off is that some of the things we've learned, we're not going to just drop them now that hopefully the pandemic may recede. Some of this stuff's going to be here for life in terms of our new procedures, ways of working. It's been great for raising awareness internally in the company, definitely. We always took integrity seriously, but I think everybody truly understands the value of it now. So it's been a great learning curve, and we've definitely changed our processes for the better, I can say.
And we're talking a lot about table tennis, but this is no joke. It was the most wagered on sport in several states and at a lot of sports books. I know in Oregon here, it was for at least 2 or 3 months, it was the most wagered on sport. So this is the kind of thing you guys were dealing with on the fly. I don't envy you, but Joe, I've talked to you for a while here. What outside of table tennis, are there any other new concerns for sports and betting that have come up during the pandemic that maybe were falling through the cracks before or have become newer concerns?
Yeah, I'd make a comment, maybe not directly to that specific question, but picking up on what Oliver said in terms of, look, it truly comes down to managing risk. And one of the things that these companies are very good at is understanding, what limits to set on certain action. And if there is suspicion in any given sport like table tennis, right, it can be managed. And in addition to making sure that there's integrity globally across all the betting platforms, each company takes that step to manage that risk. I think the other interesting thing that, we've gone 40 minutes and no one's mentioned any of the major sports leagues. And I think that's an interesting aspect of integrity, right? How do they play into this whole dynamic? Who's stepping up to work with operators and suppliers, all the partnerships. When I looked recently at the last kind of partnership tracker that people have out there, it's exploding across the industry of everyone partnering with certain leagues and certain operators and certain suppliers. And it's interesting to me from an integrity standpoint, was that a result of inactivity associated with the pandemic, or is there real value to that and how that all gets played out in the long term in so many levels of integrity, right? Whether it's betting integrity and so many of the other things that SIGA talks about in terms of integrity, because it's not just about betting, it's about a lot of other things that are involved in sport. So I think the pandemic takes all this, throws it into a blender, and what it spits out are some interesting aspects. And to Oliver's point, some of this stuff is going to stick, some of it's not, and some of it's going to morph into other areas that just frankly make us better as an industry. So maybe didn't answer the question specifically, but those are my thoughts about the pandemic.
Yeah, that's all right. We can talk whatever we want to here. You said we haven't talked about the sports leagues in the U.S., so let's do that, Joe. They've been very vocal pre all of this. They were actually the forces that that initially started the sports betting ban here in the United States, and then kept it in place as part of the ongoing court case that took 6 years to resolve, and finally in 2018. So, what have we seen as their role in all of this? They have screamed from the hilltops that integrity is a huge concern for them, and it obviously is. Again, how do they interplay with this? How much integrity risk is there at the highest level of sport in the U.S.? We're talking NFL, Major League Baseball, NBA, NHL. How much risk is there? That's a lot of questions, but you want to talk about leagues, so talk about leagues and how they interplay with integrity here.
Right. Well, look, I think we touched on it earlier. I think the sports, obviously, it's an obvious answer, which is the sport from an integrity standpoint. The sports that have high salary bases, there's just too much risk involved from the athlete's standpoint to do anything stupid per se. But that's not to say you're not going to have the one-offs. I mean, you use the example of the NBA referee. I mean, there's going to be things that happen and people that are willing to take those risks. But by and large, the leagues and the folks that I talk to at the leagues are very, very familiar and very in tune with what it takes to ensure their product has a great deal of integrity. I think the other interesting aspect is talking to a lot of the player associations out there, that they also have their eye on what it takes to offer that product with a great deal of integrity. And when you transition all that into sports wagering, as we've talked about, certainly there's going to be greater risk involved in table tennis matches and tennis in general. And I think the operators that are out there doing it, they know the sports that offer more risk, and they know the governing bodies where they have to pay more attention. But for the major sports leagues in the States, at least from a U.S. perspective, they are in the process of, or already have fairly robust organizational efforts to make sure that there's a great deal of integrity offered, right? Not to say that something can't happen, but the reality is too much money, right? Too much money involved from those guys' standpoint. But it'd be interesting to hear Ludo's and Oliver's take on that as well.
Yeah, Oliver, what is the risk of anything happening at the highest level of sport from your perspective? Again, there's more ways to fix a match than just bribery. Say, here's some money, go fix a match. That's probably not very likely. But there's blackmail. There are other things. The market is so huge that you guys it's pretty hard to think that like an NFL game, an outcome could be fixed, even a smaller outcome. Tell me if I'm wrong on that, based on everything in play and how much money is coming in on this, and you would see something that was anomalous pretty quickly, I would think.
Yeah, you definitely would see it pretty quickly, and I mean, the chances of anything happening are extremely low. That doesn't mean that we shouldn't put laser focus on it internally. We all know, not just the sports leagues, but ourselves as betting companies, that a single incident could really damage our industries, the whole ecosystem here. So even though, like you said, because of the salaries involved, the risk reward, the profile, and even the amount of oversight the regulated market gives, which I think acts as a good deterrent, there is the outside chance. You never know, but that's why we need to be vigilant. I think like Ludovico said early on, kind of one of the best things that you can do to deter all this kind of stuff is to regulate your markets. Because even if you're not, it may not be a player, it may be an official, like Joe said, we've seen the case of the NBA referee a while ago. I mean, that was happening, in a non-regulated market. So he could do his activity, and there was no framework there to uncover it. Obviously, it was uncovered because it was so obvious. But now with the regulated market, I mean, there are obvious channels. Even if it's you're only making a small amount of money from this kind of activity. It's going to get spotted, it's going to get escalated, you're going to have several agencies knocking on your door the next day. So even if it's only for a small thing, you're not even a player, the risk reward just does not compute if you want to try and fix an event at the top level.
And Ludovico, again, to use your words, they helped create this disaster, the league. So are they doing anything to help it now?
No, well, I mean, it's been tough. Again, really, GLMS supports regulated, responsible, and sustainable betting market environments. We don't believe in bans, since bans have often favored the proliferation of black market, criminal organizations, and therefore match fixing. This has been seen again and again and again. And the only way we have is to really create sustainability levels when it comes to anyone who needs to invest in a sports betting platform, anyone who's a licensed betting operators, the state who needs state entries, just to support, and more so would be with the new normal. So I think the major US leagues are very, very aware of what's happening. They started claiming money 2 years ago. As soon as PASPA was repealed, they wanted just to acquire some sort of in exchange of integrity services. They would charge operators. Now the issue is that this is a collective action, collective responsibility. The leagues alone will not be able to tackle this. You need law enforcement agencies, you need the betting world, you need the whole ecosystem to work together. And again, this is a collective action and collective responsibility environment. If you think you are the only angel, protecting integrity in the whole world, in a world which is so small today, we have seen with the pandemic how small we are, how fast money goes and viruses from one place to the other. So really, I think I would like to see more, partnership when it comes to exchange of information. I think that the major US leagues are pretty safe when it comes to this type of manipulation of sports competitions. I also think that if something happens, it will continue to happen within illegal betting environment. So if there is a tennis game, or even in US, but the money is exchanged in China or Hong Kong, you're not going to see that in the US. The market will never know. The US betting operators will never find out. And again, there will be a fix. And possibly because the illegal betting market has absorbed it all, the fix has taken place. So that's why there is a need to make the black market emerge, in order that the likes of Cambys, GLMS, other association, other stakeholders can monitor effectively the digital transactions today, more than in physical outlets.
And we've seen the manifestation of this. Whether this is helping or not, the leagues are doing official betting partnerships with sports books and operators. Both MLB and NFL have recently announced Latin American deals with Betcris, which actually used to serve offshore here in the U.S. And I've even caught word that the NFL looks like it's going to be announcing a European partner for betting. Obviously, probably not a United States one is probably not too far off either. They have daily fantasy sports partners here as well, but all very interesting. It also gets us into college. We just saw a college for the first time here in the United States ink a sports betting deal with a sports betting operator, PointsBet, which is with Colorado, and PointsBet in Colorado, one of the open markets here. But what are the challenges for college sports? Obviously, they are more vulnerable. Joe, I'll start with you again. This is where we actually have had instances of match fixing being smelled out in Nevada in the past, and I think we'd be dumb to say that there's not risk here with college athletics, even though there's going to be betting on it. We know, like Ludo said, there's been betting on this offshore in the United States for a long time. So we're bringing into the regulated market that should help, but that there are still integrity concerns for college sports and college athletes.
Yeah, and at the highest levels, right? So as you know, often legislation starts out and includes bans against any betting on college sports in any particular jurisdiction. So, and then it trickles down. What always amazes me about college sports is the whole process of trying to correctly price Division III and Division II football game. I mean, it's incredible, right? And so if you're a savvy bettor, this is where you're going to go to try to gain some advantages. And so I think that college offers the whole gamut of potential issues and potential solutions. The other thing that's going on in college sports right now that's going to have some impact some way or another are all the name licensing and image hearings and discussions that are going on for college athletes. So I think that's going to have some impact on how this plays out. But in regards to betting specifically in college sports, from a risk standpoint, this has got to be one of the biggest areas of concern. Is again, especially as you get into the smaller divisions that people are putting lines up on.
Sorry, I was muted. Oliver, what do you see on your front from working with operators and the risk there? In obviously top levels of D1 basketball and football are tough, but when you get down below that, maybe it's a little bit more susceptible.
Yeah, I mean, definitely, like Joe says, and I totally agree. It's a special case, college sports. I mean, the players aren't remunerated, but the NCAA can move as much money as the NFL at times, kind of thing, on a certain day. So you've got to watch yourself. And as Joe says, and you were saying there, that the further down you go down the slate into Division 2, Division 3, it can be harder to set odds for those kind of events. And it can also be hard to see, is something an integrity case, or is it just someone's put a bad line up? Did one of the wagerers, one of the bettors have more information than you did? Because, I mean, there's dozens of games taking place on a single day, and it's hard for a single trading operation to know who's going to be playing in each game. Is the quarterback going to get dropped in a certain game? And you've got to try and balance out what's an integrity issue and what's just kind of pricing latency in a way. But no, it's a unique challenge. But I mean, like we're saying again, it's kind of. I'd echo in a way, but I also expand upon Ludo's comments around regulated markets and prohibition of the product not being good. It also applies, I think, to the individual leagues as well. I mean, it says some states have got certain things in place to restrict wagering on college sports, and while I do agree that there should be some kind of maybe special framework for college sports, given how volatile it can be. Outright prohibitions is not going to work. I mean, that's just going to fuel the black market, and we're not going to see. If there is a fix, you're not going to see it. No one's going to find out, and the criminals are going to profit and get away with it. So it's a fine line, but I definitely would say that prohibition's not the way forwards.
I totally agree, Dustin. And the issue is that in some media in the US are even giving visibility still to offshore bookmakers. With the AGA, we've been very active to talk to the media to say, wait a second, if there is a licensed sports betting operators who are able to just invest in and buying airtime, why are you favoring offshore bookmakers? The very least you need to do is to find out if this operator has a license or not in the US. So let's be careful. We need to communicate much more effectively with the public. The perception the US public has is not, okay, betting is legal in some states, but they think is legal, and therefore they can continue betting with offshore bookmakers, not necessarily with the license operators. So there is a lot of, between reality and perception, we need to work and close the gap, Dustin. This is what I meant.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, that's my one of my core causes too, is making that difference, because you're right, and people don't seem to understand this. A lot of people saw the news in 2018 and they just thought, oh, sports betting is legal now. I can go bet wherever I want. No, the nuance of, okay, it's legal in this state and these operators are fine. Everybody, this has been a wave of opportunity for offshores in some way that may be short-lived, but you can just bet. People just think, hey, it's legal. Things are fine. This book says it's legal. I'm going to go bet here. So, you mentioned the AGA has done good work here in trying to push that message, and I agree. It's pretty core to what's going on in the U.S. We do have a question here. Leave it with you too, Ludo, and if anybody wants to weigh in, happy to hear it. Uncompetitive matches are highly vulnerable to match fixing. Will bet operators and the betting industry put pressure on federations to avoid these matches by changing formats? So, if you have any thoughts on that.
Well, I can take the tennis. I mean, we have been working as GLMS very, very closely with the tennis integrity unit. Tennis is two athletes. There have been a lot of cases. And they've done a tremendous job at the tennis integrity unit, trying to review the formats, trying to understand what can realistically be offered in terms of sports betting available to tennis events available to betting. And I think, again, working together, cooperating can only be positive if you put all stakeholders in the same group. The sponsorship, Dustin, there are deals with certain sponsors. In tennis, for example, you cannot have sponsorship on your shirts, but because of the financial constraints, they are trying to review this. But if I see the UK markets, there are operators which are closing deals with Premier League soccer clubs, and these guys are basically not offering betting services in UK, but they are simply Asian-facing operators. So the website and the mobile are all in Chinese or in an Asian language, where sports betting is completely illegal. Now, should they have a code of conduct as a sports organization? Do you have the know your owner model in some football association, soccer association, where you need to know who your owner is, who your shareholder is, if it's changing equity? You need to have the KYS, to know your sponsor. Before getting anyone on board sponsoring your team, you need to know where does he operate? Does he operate within a legal environment, or is it completely legal? And this is an issue because sports is in need of money, and the deals with Asian-facing operators is actually on the increase. And GLMS published a study of about 100 pages on how this phenomenon is actually increasing. And in the new normal, this will actually continue to do so. And this sports organization need to be very careful, because they could be vulnerable and become not credible anymore if they're, at any price are getting on board anyone, just to generate cash.
Yeah, let me make a comment on that, because Ludo, you're exactly right. Pre-PASPA, I was talking to many people, and I would tip off speeches about talking about know your partner. You better be very aware of who you're getting involved with. And I think all the points that you just covered are dead on in terms of how people approach who they're doing business with. Beyond KYC is what you're saying, essentially,
exactly.
Right? It's beyond KYC. It's know your sponsor, and I think as any emerging industry and as it is in the U.S. Kind of matures and goes through it, there's going to be certain people that come in and fall out and come in and fall out, but certainly as it speaks to integrity and as it speaks to operating in a regulated environment, which everyone is in favor of in sports.
It's not credible, Joe.
Understanding who you're doing business
exactly.
with is so critical. So critical.
It's not credible. If you want to actually safeguard integrity big time, really from A to Z, it's not only with sports betting and match fixing. Let's start with the basic. Who is your partner? Who is your sponsor? And there are UK clubs who have got 7, 6, 5, sports betting operators, but they say, this is my Asian partner. And if you go on their website, it's all in Chinese. And, I've got my own sports betting license operators in Asia who go mad, and they say, we need to be super compliant with all the standards, responsible gaming, integrity, and so on. And there you are, a major Premier League club is sponsored by an operator who does not even have a license. And I don't even know if they are monitoring any betting transaction. This is the point.
And it gets really complicated in Asia. Anyone who's done business in Asia knows it's very complicated.
Yeah.
We'll pivot back to one more question that I had. I don't think I have any more in the Q&A, but if you have one, we'll try to squeeze it in and start with you, Oliver, here. We've danced around the education part, and I don't know if this is like a worldwide phenomenon or if it's only in the United States, but there are lots of sports fans and bettors who are convinced that outcomes of everything are fixed. Like the NFL wants the Patriots to win, the NBA wants the Lakers and LeBron to win. Like again, what percentage of the population this is? But it's meaningful in that, but people still watch and they still bet on it. How much of this I feel like sports books especially struggle with this because like you guys are just as much invested in integrity as the leagues themselves, because you have a bad result where somebody fixed and you have to deal with that. It's really bad for your bottom line. And just talk about that, and maybe just the education piece of telling people like this is okay. And while we're talking about the worst case scenarios, most things are not fixed.
Absolutely, yeah. No, I can understand it. It's part of almost sporting culture. Myself, as your typical English soccer fan, there's many a time I've questioned a referee when he's cost my team in my eyes a victory. But I mean, that's just it's once you're behind the scenes a little bit, you can see how rarely this happens. And a lot of the like I say, the perceptions around this can be pretty frustrating for someone in the industry. I mean, the amount of times I'll see in the press like a match fixing case reported where the match fixer's called the bookie, and the last thing in the world that match fixers is a bookie. The bookie is the people who lose directly from this immediately. So it's kind of a lot of it's around perception, education, and as we were saying on the panel, it's kind of making it clear that I mean this kind of activity does not happen very often, especially at the top levels of international sports. I mean, and effectively the fact that we need to be very good at this as an industry, because we are looking for needles and haystacks here. We're looking to try and find these very, very pinpoint cases of suspicious activity and then escalating them to our partners. So I can definitely tell people that it's limited, but I mean, match fixing is always going to generate press as well. That's the thing. It's a very interesting subject, shall we say, to people. Journalists, of course, it's very interesting. You'll get a lot of clicks if you're talking about match fixing. I know even internally, if I'm doing like a seminar within my company, can be around match fixing, you'll get so many people listening in because it's fascinating. It's a really interesting area of the business. But that's not to say, as I say, that it's particularly prevalent. It's a very limited activity going on here, but of course we need to be vigilant.
There's also conflation between, I mean, sometimes what offshores offer and what legal sports books offer too. I mean, we have simulations of NBA 2K games where you're able to bet on that. And somebody starts a PlayStation 4, you bet on that. Marble racing was a thing I know at offshores. This stuff it's important to note that this stuff is not happening. And obviously I would not bet on any of those things, but there's a conflation there that happens. And I don't know.
Dustin,
Ludo, go ahead, Ludo.
No, I think, we need the press, the media to be on our side. We need them to communicate. Again, it's easy to say, oh, there was a match fixing case. Let's write or, say a lot of things about that. It's easier. It's a news you can easily sell because, the NBA referee was involved and it's all over the places. But we need to do more when it comes to what is behind. How do we need to explain to the consumers, to the public at large, the risks and what are the processes behind. Why there are organizations such as CAMBI, GLMS, and others, or regulatory frameworks, measures within sports betting bills, which can protect not only athletes but also consumers. And the media, this is a news which doesn't sell. So sometimes we face the paradox of saying, okay, the greatest investigative journalists, they jump on a match fixing case when it's too late. We want them to jump earlier. And we want more of these sports integrity seminars. We want this to be even sponsored by the sports organizations. With all due respect, we need to be to see the front on the front line. The major sports leagues, to do this, because this is actually in their highest interest.
Yeah,
Anything to add, Joe? Go ahead.
Yeah, no, it's the education aspect of it. We hold sports betting seminars and have been doing so for the last 2 or 3 years, even pre-PASPA, as we saw this coming on. And so we've literally had nearly every regulator from around the world come to these classes that we hold at UNLV, and operators and people that just wanted to get involved in sports and understand it. And to Oliver's point, what everyone wants to hear about? Match fixing, right? That's the hot thing. And so, but from an education standpoint, clearly helping everyone understand the frameworks that Ludo talks about, and how the regulations work in and around sports betting, just basic education. And it's funny, people that have been in the gaming industry and sport integrity for many, many years still need to understand the basics of sports betting. Not even to mention your average retail customer out there that's now downloaded the app and now is hey, look, honey, this is fantastic. Look what I can do. And I think the other confusing thing, to everyone's point, is look how, especially as indicated by all the deals that are being struck right now, there is such a blurred line between sports now and entertainment, right? It's all converging. We all see it happening. It's the train coming down the tracks. And so those suspicions, unfortunately, are just, it fuels the fire to think that, the greatest story behind the NBA is LeBron James being able to influence who the champion is, right? And these things, but people are into the conspiracy theory of it all. And as sports and entertainment and betting all converge, and we see it happening in front of us, these things are just going to keep coming and keep coming. And so understanding the process, educating people on how it really works, choosing your partners wisely, and making sure that people really know what's going on, all kind of help solve these problems. But it's changing all in front of us right now.
And here's the big takeaway. We're just about at our time up here, but 2.5 years into legal sports betting outside of Nevada and the United States, there has not been a major match fixing scandal, unless one of you guys caught it and didn't say anything about it. But I think that's a big takeaway, is that what's in place has largely worked. That's not to say there won't be in the future, but the processes that have been in place in Europe and abroad for a long time, and the work that your companies and others do, this has led to what has been a pretty good rollout in terms of safety and integrity in the United States. And we'll knock on wood and close our presentation with that. Thanks so much for those who stayed with us over late there in Europe or early here in the United States. And that will wrap up our webinar. Thanks.